Oh, wow. We're going.
Guys, move. Go. Go. Our partners are moving.
Okay.
Yes, it is. You should get to pack everything up.
Step! Step! Well, yeah. Captain MacGyver. That's sufficient space.
Hunter. These are men who are sharpshooters. They are equipped with Jaeger rifles. They're quite accurate. Out in front of the British line are British light infantrymen. And coming across the field to push back the light infantry are some American light dragoons. Dragoons are technically mounted infantry. They can fight both on horseback and on foot. You'll see the sabers they carry are quite formidable.
Where's the cannon?
There are many myths and legends about the American Revolution, so what I'm about to tell you folks is to hopefully get your understanding a little better. Braddock, it was not savagery or cowardice to take cover. Braddock ducked and then picked the redcoats off till over 900 of the redcoats were dead or wounded. Braddock himself and George Washington both were extremely brave. Braddock had numerous horses shot out from under him, and then he finally was shot through the chest. Washington had 2 horses shot out from under him back across the Monongahela. So 2/3 of that British army was wiped out. 2 of the British officers that survived were brothers, Lord Augustus Howe and little Lieutenant William Howe, or I should say young Lieutenant William Howe. They are going to create light infantry, which are British troops that have the same discipline as regulars, but they can take cover, move forward for campaign use. So the light infantry here are dressed in cut-down jackets, carrying either muskets or rifles. Pennsylvania long rifles would have appeared in the war in the first year. And myths and legends popped up about them almost immediately, that accurate. So infantry typically doesn't open fire until they are at least 80 yards away. Think of that as a football field. A lot of firing in the battles of the Revolution is done at 50 yards. At that point, you're still only going to have about 20% effective fire. The thing is, getting a volley. If your men are well trained and equipped with bayonets, and the British were very well trained and equipped with bayonets, if you rush your opponent while they're trying to reload, you can start falling back because American riflemen down at the bottom of the hill there have come out of the woods and are pushing them back. However, the advantage the light infantry has is they can load and fire 4 or 5 shots in the same amount of time it takes a rifleman to reload. Like gunpowder. So it takes a rifleman anywhere from the middle of the battle. So British light infantry, even though their weapons are a shorter range and not as accurate, they can make that up in fire. Are probably going to get slaughtered. In the first big battle of the war in 1776, the Battle of Long Island, there were whole battalions of Pennsylvania riflemen who got slaughtered by the British and the Hessians with bayonets because they didn't have a single one among them. And if you have a Pennsylvania long rifle that is 6 feet long, you've got good gunpowder, and the guy's a good shot, he can hit somebody at between 200 to 300 yards. Whereas with a smoothbore musket, past 50 yards, you're lucky if you hit anybody. But you can't put the bayonet on the rifle. And then if dragoons show up, now these are American dragoons falling back to their own line. British dragoons are Continental Line soldiers. These are regular U.S. Army soldiers, not militia. The infantry fell back to form the right flank of their line. Coming up is again one of the little field of grasshoppers, but there's a whole company or two of British grenadiers. They're the guys with the tall bearskin caps. Grenadiers were introduced into the European armies in the late 17th century, literally as men who threw balls with a fuse. And the grenadier would have to put a burning match up to his mouth and blow on it to get the fuse to light, and then launch the grenade by hand. By 1750, most grenadiers in Europe stopped throwing grenades. They tended to blow themselves up more than the enemy. But the armies kept that designation. They discovered if you take a tall, strong guy and put a tall cap on him, it makes them more formidable. So grenadiers and light infantry are called flank companies. They are the elite men of the units.
They haven't fired yet, have they? Oh, did they? Okay.
And went home after their first taste of combat. Thousands of others were taken prisoner. Hundreds were killed and wounded. Congress was given the Resolution on Independence on June 7, 1776 by Virginian Richard Henry Lee. He introduced the resolution that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. Immediately there was a kerfuffle. 2 men from New England, 2 men from the Middle States, 1 man from the South. So the 2 New Englanders, Roger Sherman and John Adams. 2 Middle States, Robert Livingston, Benjamin Franklin, one of the key events that saved the Revolution. Before that, we lost one battle after another. Congress fled Philadelphia. Washington's army, what was left of it, managed to get into Pennsylvania. And those guys who had not deserted Christmas night, 1776, in the middle of a nor'easter, where the temperature started at 40 and it dropped. And the winds blowing 30, 40 miles an hour. The river was full of ice. It went from a cold rain to sleet to an ice 10,000 regulars back. Many of them veterans of the previous campaign whose enlistments had expired. But mixed in with those veterans were raw recruits to pick them up and bring them up. The proof of that came in many ways. The most obvious one was after the Battle of Brandywine, which we lost. Over 1,000 muskets were dropped on the field by American troops retreating, and the British noted that most of them had the word Charleville written on them. They were French muskets. Of the 11 cannons the British captured from the Americans at Brandywine, 1 was cast in Philadelphia. 2 of them were Hessian cannons captured at Trenton. The remaining 8 were French. So they knew that the French were supplying them. The French had deniability. And then when the French openly come into the war, they're going to send troops, ships, uniforms, guns. And it was a huge gamble. They pulled it off. French fleet arrived, and that was the end of Cornwallis's army. See John Trumbull's painting of the Battle of Princeton. Hugh Mercer is on the ground, his dead horse behind him. Two British grenadiers are trying to bayonet him. He's manfully defending them, and Washington comes up with the reinforcement. Pickering said he saw the British take aim, and he said, "I covered my face with my hat. I couldn't bear to see him killed." The British fired at 30 yards, and they missed. There is an account somewhere that says they saw him grab his knee, but they allegedly saw blood on it afterwards, so he may have been grazed. But other than that, he was not touched in the war by any gunfire, but he was under fire continuously in these battles. Washington was very, very composed. Most of the men in a blue and buff uniform jumping up and down on the dock, shouting, "Rochambeau!" And he said it was Washington. He had completely lost control of himself. He said a child whose every wish had just been granted was on his face. He just got news that the French fleet was in the Chesapeake Bay, and it turned back the British to be the decisive battle of the war.
Subject to the arrival of the USS Enterprise, I think you're toast.
The reenactors, ladies and gentlemen, are all volunteers. They belong to women and children. Many parts of America, especially New Jersey, were absolutely unsafe, as was the Hudson Valley, no man's land. So a lot of the men who joined the Continental Army brought their wives and children with them, and they went through the same thing that the men did. The women were allowed half rations, the children quarter rations. You can imagine the difficulty if the common soldier is not getting food. How do you manage through all of that? Beyond description. That's all part and parcel of the story. The tents you see in camp in the British Army, those tents earlier, that's the standard size, 5 feet by 5 feet. That was for 5 soldiers. Continental Army, it was for 8. Now, not everybody's in the tent all at the same time. Usually, there's guys on guard duty and other duties pretty regularly. But still, it's very, very tight-knit. So folks, in the camp that you see down the bottom of the hill there, you see the enlisted men's tents, and then you see a large tent what's called a marquee. That's where the officers would live. On the lawn in front of the mansion here is a replica of George Washington.